You know, this is, excuse me, a damn fine cup of coffee.
This morning, we're continuing our journey through Dimensions by Dr. Jacques Vallée, a casebook for alien contact. We're on chapter 5. We'll be learning about signs from the heavens, apparitions, ghosties, ghoulies, I'm assuming, UFOs maybe? So that's what we're diving into. But before we get there, let's get back to the wasteland and the fun part, the reading. The Celestial Component, Chapter 5, Signs in Heaven. Apparitions. They speak all the languages of the earth. They know all about the past and future of the human race, of any human being. This statement was made in 1968 by a Spanish clerk who claims he has been in contact with extraterrestrials since 1954. The inhabitants of planet Wolf 424 are among us in human form and with false identities. They are far superior to us and very peace-loving. I am in permanent contact with them. They either write to me or call me. We have meetings. Now, the question is, how did our guy here come in contact with these beings that he's now having meetings with? Well, in 1954, Fernando Sesma, the dude, was hanging out in the University Gardens, Madrid, when a saucer showed up and threw a stone covered in hieroglyphics at him. When he picked up the stone, he noticed there were strange hieroglyphics written on it. He went home and copied these hieroglyphics down, and boom, two-way communication started between him and these beings. So that's Fernando's tale. However, in Great Britain at this time, there were many rumors spreading, many different stories just like this. British scientists, some people claimed, have been contacted by a mysterious source through radio and have become involved in undercover activities at the request of extraterrestrials. Some of these scientists have disappeared. Through such contacts, so the story goes, the extraterrestrials hope to control our history. For what purpose? I myself have received letters from individuals claiming to be members of the secret organizations whose headquarters are quite literally out of this world. These correspondents inform me that the purpose of their group is to prevent mankind from reaching other worlds in space. Of course, other contactees make exactly opposite claims. The fact remains that irrational belief in non-human control of terrestrial destinies is as old as ordinary human politics. Like with abduction stories and entity encounters, stories of aliens walking among us and possibly being involved in politics and beyond are not new. Thus, a Madrid newsman, Armando Puente, claims that Sesma warned him 3 months before Robert Kennedy's assassination that the senator would be killed. Sesma similarly predicted a wave of UFO sightings in Argentina, a much easier task. The same power attributed to saucer people was once the exclusive property of fairies. This was believed by ignorant medieval peasants and scholars as well. Thus, one of the first questions put to Joan of Arc by her inquisitors was if she had any knowledge, or if she had not assisted at the assemblies held at the Fountain of the Fairies, near Domeray, around which dance malignant spirits. Without reopening the entire problem of witchcraft, it is important to note the continuum of beliefs, which leads directly from primitive magic through mystical experience, the fairy faith and religion, to modern flying saucers. The study of witchcraft has shown these subjects to be closely interrelated, and while we are not concerned with individual beliefs in this chapter, we are interested in the social implications of such rumors, which are quite real, whether the facts are true or false. The power of these apparitions can best be seen in some of the major quote-unquote miracles of history. At Knock, Ireland in 1852, the witnesses beheld luminous beings among the Virgin. She held her hands extended apart and upward, in a position that none of the witnesses could have previously seen in any state or picture. 3 witnesses reported noticing her bare feet. One woman, Bridget Trench, was so carried away by the sight that she fervently went to the apparitions to embrace the Virgin's feet. Her arms closed on empty air. Oof. I felt nothing in the embrace but the wall. Yet the figures appeared so full and so lifelike that I could not understand, and wondered why my hands could not feel what was so plain and distinct to my sight. Bridget also remarked how heavily the rain was falling, but she added, I felt the ground carefully with my hands, and it was perfectly dry. The wind was blowing from the south right against the gable, but no rain fell on that portion of the gable where the figures were. I don't know what the heck a gable is. I'm assuming it's like maybe an overhang. So from the apparition where Bridget Trench saw the Virgin Mary so vibrantly, she leapt into the wall trying to hug her, we go to an apparition of St. John, who was standing at an angle to the other figures. Dressed as a bishop, he held a large open book in his left hand. The fingers of his right hand were raised in a gesture of teaching. One of the witnesses, Patrick Hill, went close enough to see the lines and letters in the book. When the parish priest was told of the apparitions, he said it might be a reflection from the stained glass windows of the church. Man, that's quite the reflection. And quietly spent the rest of the evening at home. The phenomenon lasted several hours. Their clothes soaked through, all the witnesses went home before midnight. The next morning, nothing was left to be seen. 10 days after the incident, a deaf child was cured and a man born blind saw after his pilgrimage to Knock. Soon, 7 or 8 cures a week were reported. And this is from a report in Knock. A dying man, so ill that he vomited blood most of the way while being carried to Knock, and received the last sacraments from the archdeacon on his arrival, was cured instantaneously after drinking some of the water in which a scrap of cement from the gable wall had been dissolved. There you go, miracle healings. I have another really good book called Occult Phenomena by Alistair Weiss, one of the OG researchers into parapsychological phenomena. Anywho, he writes about miracle cures in France in a certain spot. It might even be what we're reading about here. But one of the things where these miracle cures were happening, like legit happening, like, and there were hundreds of them, but no one mainstream was like, no one believed, no one took it seriously. All this came at an unfortunate time for the Catholic Church in Ireland. Most of the Archdeacon Kavanagh's fellow priests doubted and disapproved, as they do. The Knock Church had been built only 50 years earlier, when Irish Catholics had emerged from hiding, and much as in Lourdes and Fatima, the clergy tried at first not to get involved in the pilgrimages. Local and national papers were asked by the clergy to refrain from giving the apparition publicity, while papers hostile to Catholicism printed derisive articles about it. Attempts to explain the phenomenon by physical means were made. A science professor from Maynooth performed tests for the official commission of inquiry appointed by the Archbishop of Tuam. He used a magic lantern to project photographic images on the gable wall in the presence of 20 priests, and testified that the test ruled out the possibility that the apparition had been a product of a photographic hoax. A correspondent of the London Daily Telegraph made his own tests at a later date and reported that, however the reported apparitions were caused, they could not have been due to a magic lantern. From the Knock case, we're going to dive back into another similar incident occurring during the day in Mexico. And we're switching to a view. This is what it would be like if we were reading in the wasteland and an orange eyes was watching us. An incident occurring at daybreak on Saturday, December 9th, 1531 in Mexico represents the culmination of everything we have discussed, of tremendous sociological and psychological impact. It has left physical traces that can still be seen and indeed are still an object of devotion today. A 57-year-old Aztec native whose Nahuatl name was Singing Eagle and whose Spanish name was Juan Diego was walking to the church of Tlatelolco near Mexico City. Suddenly, he froze in his tracks as he heard a concert of singing birds, sharp and sweet. The air was bitterly cold. No bird in its right mind would sing at such an hour. And yet, the harmonious music went on, stopping abruptly. Then someone with a woman's voice called Juan Diego's name. The voice was coming from the top of the hill, which was hidden in a frosty mist of brightening cloud. And when he climbed the hill, he saw, as Ethel Cook Elliott writes in A Woman Clothed with the Sun, the sun wasn't above the horizon yet. Juan saw her as if the sun, because of the golden beams that rayed her person from head to feet. She was a young girl about 14 years old and wonderfully beautiful. So far, we have a perfect beginning for a standard fairy apparition. But in the ensuing dialogue, Juan Diego was told that the girl was Mary and that she desired a temple at a particular place. So run now to Tecnolochican, Mexico City, and tell Lord Bishop all that you have seen and heard. This was easier to say than to accomplish. Poor natives were not in the habit of going to the Spanish section of the city, and even less to the bishop's palace. Bravely, Juan ran down the mountain and begged the noble bishop, Don Fray Juan de Zumárraga, to hear his story. Naturally, the bishop, although he was kind to the native, did not believe a word of his tale. So Juan went back through the mountains and met the lady a second time. He advised her to send the bishop a more suitable messenger, and he was quite blunt about it. "Listen, little son," was the sharp answer. So this is what you get. Don't try and, mansplain to an apparition. So this is what happened after Juan tried to explain something to the Virgin Mary. "Listen, little son," was the sharp answer. "There are many I could send, but you are the one I have chosen for this task. So tomorrow morning, go back to the bishop, tell him it is the Virgin Mary who sends you, and repeat to him my great desire for a church in this place." The next morning, Juan Diego returned to Mexico City and met again with the patient bishop. Juan Diego was so adamant and seemed so honest in telling his story that Fray Juan de Zumárraga was shaken. He told Juan to ask the apparition for a tangible sign, and he instructed 2 servants to follow the native to watch his actions. They tracked him through the city, observed that he spoke to no one, and saw him climb the hills, and then he vanished. They searched the area without finding a trace of him. Again, the perfect fairy tale. But Juan had gone to the hill. He gave the apparition the bishop's answer, and she said, "Very well, little son. Come back tomorrow at daybreak. I will give you a sign for him. You have taken much trouble on my account, and I shall reward you for it. Go in peace and rest." The next morning, Juan did not come. His uncle, his only relative, was dying. Juan spent the day trying to relieve his sufferings and left only on Tuesday to get a priest. As he was running to Tlatelolco, the apparition again barred his way. Embarrassed, he told her why he had not followed her instructions, and she said, "My little son, do not be distressed and afraid. Am I not here who am your mother? Are you not under my shadow and protection? Your uncle will not die at this time. This very moment his health is restored. There is no reason now for the errand you set out on, and you can peacefully attend to mine. Go up to the top of the hill, cut the flowers that are growing there, and bring them to me." There were no flowers on the top of the hill, as Juan Diego knew very well. In the middle of December, there could be no flower there. And yet, upon reaching this place, he found Castellan roses, their petals wet with dew. He cut them, and using his long cape, his tilma, to protect them from the bitter cold, he carried them back to the apparitions. She arranged the flowers he had dropped in the wrap, and then tied the lower corners of the tilma behind his neck so that none of the roses would fall. She advised him not to let anybody but the bishop see the sign she had given him, and then disappeared. Juan Diego never met her again. At the bishop's palace, several servants made fun of the native visionary. They pushed him around and tried to snatch the flowers, but when they observed how the roses seemed to dissolve when they reached for them, they were astonished and let him go. Juan was taken once more to the bishop. Juan Diego put up both hands and untied the corners of the crude cloth behind his neck. The looped-up fold of the tilma fell. The flowers, he thought, were the precious sign, and tumbled out and lay in an untidy heap on the floor. Alas, the Virgin's careful arrangement. But Juan's confusion over the mishap was nothing to what he felt immediately after it. Inside of seconds, the bishop had risen from his chair and was kneeling at Juan's feet. The inside of a minute, all the other persons in the room had surged forward and were also kneeling. The bishop was kneeling before Juan's tilma, and as Ethel Cook Elliot remarks, millions of people have knelt before it since, for it has been placed over the high altar at the Basilica of Our Lady Guadalupe in Mexico City. And I've been there. It's freaking sweet. I went down there a long time ago with one of my best friends, and he's from Mexico, so we got to tour all around Mexico City. It was really cool, and we went to this spot. It was like way before I was dove into weird things. So I would love to go back there now, but that's really so I've been there. I was like, oh, is this the spot? But yeah, I've been to this. It's a really beautiful spot, really interesting, really just even before I was more of a believer in the weird, it was a very powerful feeling place. The tilma consists of two pieces, woven of fibers and sewn together, measuring 66 by 41 inches. On this coarse material, whose color is that of unbleached linen, a lovely figure can be seen, 56 inches tall, and it's the Lady of Guadalupe. And here's another quote from the incident from a primary source. Surrounded by golden rays, it emerges as from a shell of light, clear cut and lovely in every detail of line and color. The head is bent slightly and very gracefully to the right, just avoiding the long seam. The eyes look downward, but the pupils are visible. This gives an unearthly impression of lovingness and lovableness. The mantle that covers the head and falls to the feet is greenish blue with a border of the purest gold, and scattered through with golden stars. The tunic is rose-colored, patterned with a lace-like design of golden flowers. Below is a crescent moon, and beneath it appear the head and arms of a cherub. Juan's uncle was cured, as he was awaiting the priest. Too weak to even drink the medicine his nephew had prepared, he saw his room suddenly filled with soft light. A luminous figure, that of a young woman, appeared near him. She told him he would get well and informed him of Juan Diego's mission. She also said, "Call me and call my image Santa Maria de Guadalupe," or so the message was understood. In the 6 years that followed the incident, over 8 million natives were baptized. In recent times, some 1,500 persons still go and kneel before Juan Diego's tilma every day. This case reminds us of several important aspects of the many tales of fairies we have reviewed. Dang, I didn't know the story at all. It'd be so cool to go back there and know the story, because I didn't speak the language at all, so I didn't know what was going on. I just knew it was like a big Catholic, it seemed like a giant Catholic amusement park almost. This case reminds us of several important aspects of the many tales of fairies we have reviewed. The mysterious sweet music announcing that the fairy draws near, the flowers, roses once again, that grow in an impossible place, and the sign given to the human messenger, which changes nature as he goes away. like the coals that changed to gold given to human midwives by the gnomes, the numerous similar symbols found in countless tales. Indeed, we cannot help but recall here the word of Heartland in the science of fairy tales. The gift of an object apparently worthless, which turns out, on the conditions being observed, of the utmost value, is a commonplace of fairy transactions. It is one of the most obvious manifestations of superhuman power. On a final aspect of the cosmic symbolism, the crescent moon under the Virgin's feet, as in the lines of Revelation. And here's some lines from Revelation that go with the image of Guadalupe that appeared on the tilma. And appeared a great sign in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon was under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. What does it all mean? Is it reasonable to draw a parallel between religious apparitions, the fairy faith, the reports of dwarf-like beings with supernatural powers, the airship tales of the United States in the last century, and the present stories of UFO landings? I would strongly argue that it is for one simple reason. The mechanisms that have generated the various beliefs are identical. Their human context and their effect on humans are constant. The observation of this very deep mechanism is crucial. It has little to do with the problem of knowing whether UFOs are physical objects or not. Attempting to understand the meaning, the purpose of the so-called flying saucers, as many people are doing today, is just as futile as with the pursuit of fairies. If one makes the mistake of confusing appearance and reality, the phenomena has stable invariant features, some of which we have tried to identify and label clearly. But we have also had to note carefully the chameleon-like character of the secondary attributes of the sightings, the shapes of the objects, the appearances of the occupants, and their reported statements vary as a function of the cultural environment into which they are projected. As we have seen with the airship stories in Chapter 2, a good number of bearded characters alighted in the Midwest and elsewhere in 1897 to request water from a well, bluestones, or other similar things. The stories witnesses told were believable, if somewhat astounding, to American farmers at the time. The airship itself corresponded to the popular concept of an elaborate flying machine. These airships had wheels, turbines, wings, powerful lights. There is only one detail not yet dealt with: the fact that the airship, though believable to the witnesses of 1897, is no longer credible to us. Yeah, no one sees like steampunk airships anymore as UFOs. That was what happened during the UFO flap of 1897, where hundreds and thousands of people around the world saw these airships, especially in America. We know that the device, as described, could not possibly fly unless its outside appearance was designed to deceive potential witnesses. But if so, why? And what is it? What was the purpose of such a craft? Perhaps the airship, like the fairy tricks and flying saucers, was a lie so well engineered that its image could sink very deep into the human consciousness and then be forgotten, as UFO landings are periodically forgotten, as the appearances of supernatural beings in the Middle Ages are forgotten. But then, are they really forgotten? Jacques, you are asking the questions right now. Oh no. Oh no. Human actions are based on imagination, belief, and faith, not on objective observation. As military and political experts know well, even science, which claims its methods and theories are rationally developed, is shaped by emotion and fancy, or by fear, and to control human imagination. And to control human imagination is to shape mankind's collective destiny. Beyond the question of the physical nature of the UFOs, it is imperative that we study the deeper problem of their impact on our imagination and culture. How the UFO phenomena will affect us in the long run, our views about science, about religion, about the exploration of space, is impossible to measure. But the phenomena does appear to have a real effect. And a particular feature of this mechanism is that it affects equally those who quote unquote believe and those who oppose its reality in a physical sense. For the time being, the observation can be made that it is possible to make large sections of any population believe in the existence of supernatural races, in the possibility of flying machines, in the plurality of inhabited worlds, by exposing them to a few carefully engineered scenes, the details of which are adapted to the culture and symbols of a particular time and place. AKA, whatever this is, molds itself to the time and place and presents itself as thus. Could the meetings with UFO entities be designed to control our beliefs? Consider their changing character. In the United States, they appear as science fiction monsters. In South America, they are sanguinary and quick to get into a fight. In France, they behave like rational, Cartesian, peace-loving tourists. The Irish gentry, if we believe its spokesman, was an aristocratic race, organized somewhat like a religious military order. The airship pilots were strongly individualistic characters with all the features of an American farmer. Now consider the following case, which illustrates the same point. The date is October 23rd, 1954. The place is near Tripoli, Libya, about 3 a.m. An Italian farmer saw a flying craft land a few dozen yards from him. It was shaped like an egg, laid horizontally. The upper half was transparent and flooded with a very white light. The lower half appeared to be metallic. The forepart had 2 side ports. The central part had an external ladder. The hind part had 2 vertically disposed wheels, one above the other, and 2 cylindrical protruding tubes. While descending, this sounds like a wild, Professor Frink craft. While descending, the craft made a noise similar to that of a compressor. This also makes me think of the spacecracker dude. He saw the craft he saw and described, and the aliens he described sound right out of like that era's episodes of Twilight Zone, like those used for inflating car tires. So it sounded like no propeller was visible. The fuselage was surmounted by 2 antennae, one behind the other, and it bore the kind of undercarriage with 6 wheels, 2 pair in the fore of the craft and one pair behind. The machine was about 6 yards long and 3 yards wide. Inside it were 6 men in yellowish coveralls, wearing gas masks. Oh, sweet. One of them took his mask off in order to blow into some sort of tube. His face appeared to be that of a normal human being. These guys sound wild. Blown into tubes, there's wheels all over their UFO. When the witness got close to the object and put a hand on the ladder, a strong electrical shock threw him to the ground. One of the occupants made gestures as if to warn him, well, too late, for his sake, to keep away from the craft. Another occupant pulled out a wheel and again put it back where it formerly was. Then, pushing a button, he caused a kind of half container to cover the wheel inside of the cockpit. A sort of radio set complete with wires and operated by a man with earphones was visible. All 6 pilots were busy on the instrument panels. And this is a craft. Everyone's got to work all the time to get this thing in the air. The incident lasted about 20 minutes. The object silently took off and reached an altitude of 50 yards. Then it went east at a dizzying speed. The imprints left by the undercarriage wheels on the soft ground have been photographed. They resemble those of normal rubber wheels. Their length was only about 2 feet. If it were possible to make 3-dimensional holograms with mass and project them through time, I would say this is what the farmers saw. And with that theory, we would explain many of the apparitions in numerous UFO cases, and in some religious miracles. The beings appeared as 3-dimension images whose feet did not actually touch the ground, holograms. But what about the other physical actions, such as the electric shocks? As we read the account of the Libyan landing case, it is tempting to assume that the farmer, far from witnessing by chance the maneuvers of interplanetary visitors, was deliberately exposed to a scene designed to be recorded by him and transmitted to us. Hence the gas masks, the instrument panel, and the radio set complete with wires. The same is true with the following Italian case, which took place in Abbiate-Bouzon, near Varese, on April 24th, 1950. At about 10 p.m., Bruno Facchini heard and saw sparks, which he attributed to a storm, but he soon discovered a dark mass hovering between a pole and a tree 200 yards from his house. A man dressed in tight-fitting clothes, yep, same theme, and wearing a helmet appeared to be making repairs. There were 3 other figures working around the huge craft. This work being over, a trap through which the light had been shining was closed, and the thing took off. Other details were as follows. Right? You know, the alien pit crew is so funny. I love how in the 50s, that's how it like presented itself. It was like always a pit crew of dudes that would be landing and like furiously like pressing buttons and like blowing into tubes and then asking people for water and stuff. It's like that kind of entity encounter does not happen anymore. So other details were as follows. The object made a sound similar to that of a giant beehive, and the air seemed strangely warm around it. 2 of the men were standing on the ground near a ladder. The third was on a telescopic elevator, the base of which touched the ground and was holding something near a group of pipes. This produced the sparks seen by Fenici. They were about 5 feet 9 inches tall, dressed in gray diving suits with oval transparent glass in front of their faces, which were concealed behind gray masks. From the fore portion of the mask, a flexible pipe emerged at the level of the mouth. They wore earphones. Inside the craft could be seen a series of oxygen-type containers and many dials. When Ficini offered his help, the men talked among themselves in a guttural sounds. The guttural sounds tracks with a lot of other strange entity encounters that we've come across. And one of them took a camera-like device from around his neck and projected a beam of light on Fenici, who tumbled away for several yards. He was then caught by a rush of air and thrown again to the ground. They subsequently ignored him as they recovered the elevator and brought it inside the craft, which took off. After a sleepless night, Fenici returned to the site and found some metal fragments left by the soldering operation. Also 4 circular imprints and patches of scorched grass. He revealed the observation only 10 days later, when his doctor treated him for the pains and bruises resulting from his fall and advised him to call the police. Ministry of Defense technicians who examined the metal samples found them to consist of an anti-friction material which was very resistant to heat. The incident had other witnesses who testified privately. Again, light in the sky, saw some creatures, other witnesses. It all tracks. Had Mr. Fenici been exposed deliberately to a faked apparition of space beings? What could be the purpose of such an elaborate hoax? Who can afford to contrive such a complex scheme for so little of an apparent result? Is human imagination alone capable of playing such tricks on itself? Or should we hypothesize that an advanced race somewhere in the universe and sometime in the future has been showing us 3-dimensional space operas for the last 2,000 years in an attempt to guide our civilization? If so, do they deserve our congratulations? Are we dealing instead with a parallel universe, another dimension, where there are human races living and where we may go at our expense, never to return to the present? Are these races only semi-human, so that in order to maintain contact with us, they need crossbreeding with men and women of our planet? That's a similar theme in like all abduction stories. Is this the origin of the many tales and legends where genetics plays a great role? The symbolism of the virgin in occultism and religion, the fairy tales involving human midwives and changelings, The adult overtones of the flying saucer reports, the biblical stories of intermarriage between the Lord's angels and terrestrial women, those whose offsprings were giants. From that mysterious universe are higher beings projecting objects that can materialize and dematerialize at will. Are UFOs quote-unquote windows rather than quote-unquote objects? There is nothing to support these assumptions, yet in view of the historical continuity of the phenomena, alternatives are hard to find, unless we deny the reality of all the facts, as our peace of mind would indeed prefer. The problem cannot be solved yet. If we absolutely must have something to believe, then we should join one of the numerous groups of people who have all the quote-unquote answers. Yeah, no, avoid. Read Menzel's books or the Condon Report. Yeah, that fine piece of scientific recklessness. And the Condon Report was a report the government released after Project Blue Book that tried to debunk everything. That's where we get like wild explanations like mass hysteria all the time or swamp gas. Or subscribe to the magazines that quote-unquote prove that quote-unquote flying saucers are real and from outer space. I'm not writing for such people, but for those few who have gone through all this and have graduated to a higher, clearer level of perception of the total meaning of that tenuous dream that underlies the many nightmares of human history. For those who have recognized the delicate levers of the collective unconscious. Now let's get to conjectures, the final section of this section. It may seem useless to conjecture about the mystery that, according to all evidence, remains unidentified. But in this book, we have already seen that the UFO phenomena has left a clear series of marks in the beliefs and attitudes of our contemporaries, in a pattern not only identifiable, but also by no means unprecedented. It is not pointless to try and devise critical tests, both sociological and physical, to determine whether or not purposeful design is involved in the phenomena the witnesses describe. Basically, all the incidents we read about, are they being designed by somebody? All that to say, whenever a set of unusual circumstances is presented, it is in the nature of the human mind to analyze it until a rational pattern is encountered at some level. But it is quite conceivable that nature should present us with circumstances so deeply organized that our observational and logical errors would entirely mask the pattern to be identified. To the scientist, there is nothing surprising in this statement. The history of science consists of dual progress, the refinement of the observational techniques and the improvement of analytical methods. On the other hand, the proposition that the universe might contain intelligent creatures exhibiting such an organization that no model of it could be constructed on the basis of current human concepts is also theoretically plausible. The behavior of such beings would necessarily appear random or absurd, or would go undetected, especially if these beings possess physical means of retiring at will beyond the human perceptual range, or into other dimensions. Such physical actions would appear on scientific records as mere random accidents, easily ascribable to instrument error or to a variety of natural causes. And that's what we, makes sense. Considering the UFO phenomena as a special instance of that more fundamental question, we are presented with the dual possibility of very long-term unsolvability and of continued manifestation. And this is true whether the phenomena is natural or artificial in nature. The development of a new myth feeding upon this duality is entirely predictable. In the absence of a rational solution to the mystery and due to intense public interest, it is quite likely that in the coming years, every brand of charlatanism will use it as a base. Although it is not possible to predict its exact form. Yeah, that's why watch out. That's why I love how Jacques talks about earlier. Just watch out for anyone who be talking about having all the answers, right? Not finding me joining no group. We may very well be living in the early years of a new mythological movement, and it may eventually give our technological age its Olympus or its Valhalla. whether we regard such a development as an asset or as a blow to our culture. Is this kind of talking about AI? Because many observations of UFO phenomena appear self-consistent and at the same time irreconcilable with scientific knowledge. A logical vacuum has been created that human imagination tries to fill with fantasy. Such situations have been frequently observed in the past, and they have given us both the highest and basest form of religious, poetic, and political activity. It is entirely possible that the UFO phenomena will give rise to similar developments because its manifestations coincide with a renewal of interest in the human value of technology. It is precisely because science is the process through which unsolvable emotional arguments can be transformed into organized sets of subproblems amenable to rational analysis that the UFO phenomena is interesting. Therefore, to say that UFOs are not a scientific problem or even to pose the question of whether they are or not is to utter absurdity. There is no such thing as a scientific problem. It is the man who looks at the problem who is or is not scientific in his approach. Science is an object in the human mind, not a characteristic. We are at liberty either to bestow upon or to withdraw from every funny-looking contraption that happens to cross our skies. For a scientist, the only valid question is to decide whether the phenomenon can be studied by itself or whether it is an instance of a deeper problem. This book attempts to illustrate, and only to illustrate, the latter approach. And my conclusion is that through the UFO phenomena, we have the unique opportunities to observe folklore in the making and to gather scientific material at the deepest source of human imagination. We will be the object of much contempt by future students of our civilization if we allow this material to be lost. Tradition is a meteor which, once it falls, cannot be rekindled. Oh, yes. Fact 1. There have been among the public in all countries since the middle of 1946, an extremely active generation of colorful rumors. They center on a considerable number of observations from unknown machines close to the ground in rural areas, the physical traces left by these machines, and their various effects on humans and animals. Fact 2. When the underlying archetypes are extracted from these rumors, the extraterrestrial myth is seen to coincide to a remarkable degree with the fairy myth of Celtic countries. The observations of the scholars of past ages and the widespread belief among all peoples concerning entities whose physical and psychological descriptions place them in the same category as present-day UFO nauts. Fact 3. The entities human witnesses report to have seen, heard, and touched fall into various biological types. Among them are beings of giant stature, men indistinguishable from us, winged creatures, and various types of monsters. Most of the so-called pilots, however, are dwarfs from two main groups. One, hairy beings identical to the gnomes of medieval theory, with small bright eyes and deep rugged old voices. And two, beings who answer the description of the sylphs of Middle Ages, or the elves of the fairy faith, with human complexions, oversized heads, and silvery voices. All the beings have been described with and without breathing apparatuses. Beings of various categories have been reported together. The overwhelming majority are humanoid. Fact 4. The entities reported behavior is consistently absurd as the appearance of their craft is ludicrous. In numerous instances, the verbal communications with them, their assertions, have been systematically misleading. Yeah, just like with Indrid Cold, who we read about very recently. Very nonsensical words being shared with the people who encountered him. This is true for all cases on record, from the encounters with the gentry in the British Isles, to the conversations with airship engineers in 1897 during the Midwest flap, and discussions with alleged Martians in Europe, North and South America, and elsewhere. This absurd behavior has had the effect of keeping professional scientists away from the area where that activity was taking place. It has also served to give their saucer myth its religious and mystical overtones. Fact 5. The mechanism of the apparitions in legendary, historical, and modern times is standard and follows a model of religious miracles. Several cases which bear the official stamp of the Catholic Church, such as those in Fatima and Guadalupe, are in fact, if one applies the definition strictly, nothing more than UFO phenomena, where the entity has delivered a message having to do with religious beliefs rather than with space or with engineering, because that's what the culture in that area is into. Given the above 5 facts, I believe the following 3 propositions are true. So let's get into Vallée's propositions. Proposition 1. The behavior of a superior race would not necessarily appear purposeful to the human observer. Scientists who brush aside UFO reports because obviously intelligent visitors would not behave like that simply have not given serious thought to the problem of non-human intelligence. I know, dude, it's like we do not know everything. It'd be weird to us. It's like we'd be watching, it's like ants watching us do stuff. They don't know what we're doing. We wouldn't know what a higher consciousness is doing or why. Observation and deduction agree, in fact, that the organized action of a superior race must appear absurd to the inferior one. That this does not preclude contact and even cohabitation is an obvious fact of daily life on our planet, where humans, animals, and insects have interwoven activities in spite of their different levels of nervous system organization. Proposition 2. If we recognize that the structure and nature of time is as much of a puzzle to modern physicists as it was to Reverend Kirk, for example, then it follows that any theory of the universe that does not take our ignorance into account is bound to remain an academic exercise. Proposition 3. The entire mystery we are discussing contains all the elements of a myth that could be utilized to serve long-term social manipulation purposes, as illustrated by the curious link between the contents of the reports and the progress of human technology, from aerial ships to dirigibles to ghost rockets to flying saucers and to biogenetic engineering. A link that has never received a satisfactory interpretation within a sociological framework. With respect to the last point, I find it remarkable that the first instance of a blackout caused by a UFO should be found in The Twilight Bar, a play written by Arthur Koestler in 1933. During the play, which takes place in a small unnamed island where a civil war is about to break out, just like in history, right? When in times of chaos, apparitions, entities, and UFOs take to the skies. An enormous meteor flies over the town with a high-pitched whistling sound as all the lights go out. The craft plunges into the sea, and 2 beings dressed in white coveralls and moving as if in a trance come ashore and introduce themselves as messengers to warn mankind that it has 3 short days in which to mend its ways. Otherwise, the creatures say mankind will be destroyed and the earth will be repopulated by a superior race. The first reference to UFO effects on car ignition came in a novel written in 1950 by Bernard Newman, entitled The Flying Saucer. It is true that when Newman's book was written, some UFO reports involving magnetic disturbances of the compass were already circulating. Even in 1944, the military had already amassed considerable information about unidentified flying objects, the first large-scale scientific investigation having been done by the National Bureau of Standards the previous year. But the fact remains that the coincidence between these works of imagination and the actual details of the reports that came from the public is a remarkable one, and it opens the way to unlimited speculation. Knowledge of the structure of time would imply superior knowledge of destiny. I am using the word destiny to designate not the fate of individuals, but the mechanism through which physical events unfold and the canvas upon which they are implemented. Before we go on to the question of the psychic component of the experience, perhaps I should remind the reader of the 2 points we have touched upon earlier. 1, the relativity of the time in Mangonia, as in when you go into a spacecraft, you get abducted, they take you to another dimension, you go to the fairyland, you go wherever, whatever your culture considers the beyond the veil, time stops. It runs different for you there. It doesn't run like it does here in our 3D plane. 2. That astonishing little remark made by a sylph to Francis Cardon, or Facius Cardon, which antedates quantum theory by 4 centuries. The sylph added that God created the universe from moment to moment, so that should he desist for an instant, the world would perish. Constant motion. As Jerome Cardan says, be this fact or fable, so it stands. And that is chapter 5 of Dimensions. Next week, we're going to get into the psychic component, metalogic, and the return of the specter, baby. That sounds very exciting. Chapter 5, what a wild ride, from UFO reports to miracles, and then back to our favorite, fairies, baby. And a really good breakdown of the phenomena by Jacques Vallée and everything we've read so far. His 5 facts and 3 propositions were really good. I'm going to have to read those again. Thank you for joining me, though. That's all I got for the Sunrise Book Club. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Join me for the Monsters After Midnight on Saturday, live here on Twitch, and then I'll be back some morning next week. But catch you later. Ta-ta.